welcome to another episode of the Trauma Translator. I'm Lauren Friedman, your host, and we're going to be redefining the human experience through the lens of trauma to help you biohack an embodied comeback. Today, I have a wonderful guest and who I'm about to introduce. Please welcome my next guest. Hi, Matija, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for having me. So, my name is Matija. I'm the co-founder of Trauma Translations and the current CEO. And it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur?
Sure. I mean, it's a long story. I'm becoming an old man eventually, but I studied languages. I studied Chinese, and before that, Italian, German, and so on. I come from a very small country called Slovenia, where we have to speak a ton of foreign languages. And then in 2014, I started my entrepreneurial journey by setting up a language school that was partially online, partially in person. And through that business, a lot of our clients were major companies who were asking us if we can also translate stuff for them. So eventually we started building something that is now the Taya AI localization platform, where we help companies translate their content more efficiently by the means of automation and AI and other modern technology. So it's quite a long journey so far.
That sounds like a interesting journey. So what brought you into, why did you decide to open up a translation software? There's so many out there. So what's the difference in yours? Like what's the value?
Yeah, true. That's a good question. So when we were starting out with the translation business, that was 2017, something like that. A lot of the clients who asked us for the translations, we figured out, it's a very manual process. Everything had to be done totally in person. So you have to send an email to a translation agency, wait for them to get back with a quote. And then you would wait for these translators to do whatever they do in the background. And that included like 5 different pieces of software again. So I figured out eventually that, I can streamline all of this. I can put it into an automation chain and make it a much more pleasant experience for everyone involved. So through that, we started building this self-serve process where clients can just drag and drop their files and get them translated very efficiently, and they don't have to go through all the hassle of emails and all of that. And eventually it grew into what it is today, where users can drag and drop their files, get an AI translation immediately, or they can outsource to a number of professional linguists that work with us, or they can even edit the translation themselves in the platform. So it's quite an evolutionary story.
So we were talking a little bit before the show, and you were explaining your own passion behind the translation, which I think is the most interesting part, because technology is technology. I don't want to talk about technology on this podcast. What I actually want to talk about is life through the lens of trauma and how technology relates. Because to me, the human brain is more powerful than AI has ever been. We're training AI to be like the human brain. So AI is not interesting to me. I've been selling AI and ML since like 2007, right? It's been around for a long time. And even before that, but like we've all been selling
for
that.
For those of us in the know, right?
What?
Sorry. For those of us in the know, it's been along for a long time.
Yeah. So the thing about it just became popular to the consumer recently, right? It just became accessible with all of these open sources. So for me, I'm not interested in AI, but what I am interested in is why this is such a passion point for you. Because when we were talking before, you were talking to me about the different languages and your background. And to me, that's something that I met a girl yesterday when I was walking outside. I walk around a lot outside it's actually bilateral stimulation, which means it uses both sides of your brain and it activates both sides of your brain. So you actually have the ability to get your nervous system to a dysregulated state, to a state of rest and digest, right? It's not in a state of hyperarousal. So I actually learned how to walk like in 2022 for the very first time. I've only known how to run my whole life. And that's what got me sick. And that's what the majority of society only knows how to run. We don't know how to walk. But I met a girl outside. Her name was Shy. What's up, Shy? And we connected on LinkedIn. And we were talking about names that are hard to spell and pronounce. And I'm not talking about from other countries. I just mean in general, like in the US, right? And she was saying how she changed her name legally because of that exact thing. And I said, my sister had a very normal name, right? But her name was spelled differently. It was spelled her name was Michelle, and it was spelled with 1 L, which is like the French way. And my mom thought it was great. There was someone that was on a newscaster named Michelle Marsh in the 80s, and she liked her. So she named my sister Michelle, right? but this child, every time she went to find like a keychain, a bumper sticker, anything that had her name on it, it didn't exist. And it made her feel really bad after a while because people would spell her name wrong. They would, talk to her, they would say it differently. And it kind of felt dehumanizing. So when I met this girl yesterday, she was telling me how she changed her name. And I was like, good, I'm happy you did that. Because it's when you can't find something that is meaningful to you, it dehumanizes you. So when we were talking before about having to think about how you're going to use your own language, right, to a global community versus wherever you're doing for that day, to me, that's truly one of like the foundational elements of complex trauma, because it's about not being able to be your authentic self because you have to perform for an audience. So talk to me a little bit about how that has impacted your business and your vision and why you went to market, because I have to imagine there's some involvement there.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting topic. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm from a very small country where there's only 2 million people that actually speak my language. So if you ever want to get anywhere in this economy in my country, you have to be able to speak other languages. So English is it's very natural to us where I come from. So we learn it at a very early stage. But then we also pick up German because we're right next door to Austria and Germany. We also pick up Italian because we're 2 hours drive from Venice, right? So very close to Italy as well. And then we, Slovenia, where I come from, it used to also be a part of a bigger country called Yugoslavia, where people spoke Serbian and Croatian. So a lot of Slovenians also speak that. So it's very natural for me to pick up languages. But my journey actually started when I was going into high school. I decided to go into coding, into programming, because I was a huge computer nerd already back then. Only to learn that with my dyslexia, it's a bit hard to write code. So eventually, like in the middle of the second year of high school, I decided to switch schools and go from a technical school for programming into a more linguistic school where I would learn German and Italian as well. So that was kind of like a first step towards this. But in life is funny somehow. In the years to come, the two paths converged again. So now I'm dealing with languages and I'm dealing with coding, and I've put the two together to good use with the intention of building a company that helps businesses connect more efficiently with their target audiences. So the idea is that not only you can translate stuff and just get it done, you can do that with Google Translate. The idea is that the translation that you get from our platform actually reflects your tone of voice and make sure that the content you're putting out there resonates with your target audience. And this is the main intention behind what we do. We're trying to connect people.
So is it like an iframe on a page, like an NLP iframe, like something that's picking?
Oh no, it's actually much more complex. It's a whole platform where you can upload files or connect different systems via API and get all of your content translated, be it video or websites or documents or whatever. And then you can translate it either with AI only, which learns from your corrections and keeps to your terminology. So it's a pretty advanced system. But on the other hand, we know that AI has a lot of limitations. It has its uses, but it's not perfect for everything. Like for example, I wouldn't want to put our homepage through our system and just trust that. I would want to have a professional linguist review it. Not only myself, a professional linguist review it and make sure that it's properly translated in whatever target audience we're aiming for. So it's not just language. When you're translating, you're not just aiming for English to German or English to Spanish or whatever. You're aiming to put a meaning across, and not only a meaning, you want to put the emotions. You want to invoke emotions on the other side. You want to make sure that your audience can actually react to whatever your content is. And just putting it to an AI translator will never achieve that. You still need a pair of human eyes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, number one, you said so many interesting things in just now. I want to start with the dyslexia, because I think that that's something people don't talk about a lot, because I agree with you. And by the way, before we go into that, I do also want to say very, very infrequently, the last time I remember hearing a founder or anybody who has a business that they founded saying with authenticity, I wouldn't put my own homepage to this. I would want it done manually. I think that just speaks to your integrity and your vision and your purpose, because the whole idea is to translate it so that people understand and connect with it. And that's what I'm doing too with trauma, right? I'm using it I'm using trauma education to connect with disparate and cross-disciplinary audiences, that the foundational connection and the power of connection is the human experience, right? Everybody has something from which to heal. And the dyslexia part, it's funny that you should say that, because a lot of people are diagnosed with these types of learning issues and ODD, ACDs, ADDs and OCDs and all the other issues. And what it really stems from is unprocessed generational complex trauma. You named all the different European countries that you're all near, right? And it's wonderful. Like in America, we're not taught multiple languages. We're only taught America first, English only, So if you want to learn a new language, you can do it on your own.
We totally find it hilarious in Europe, by the way.
What?
I said we totally find that hilarious in Europe, by the way.
Oh yeah, well, because we're ignorant. Yeah, 100%. It's funny until this is what happens to our country.
Until it's not, yeah.
Yeah, until it's not. So that's my exact point, is that, yeah, it is funny. It's funny that Americans are ignorant, but it's not, because now we're at a point where our society is collapsing. So
yeah. I mean, it used to didn't be that way. Like I remember when I was a kid, America was like, we literally had a saying in the early 90s when I was a small kid. People would actually say, "Oh, this is America. Like this is so cool." They would say, "This is America," unironically. Because we went from being a socialist country in not really the Eastern Bloc, but somehow related to both the Soviet Union and the West. There was Yugoslavia, like it was in the middle of something, and it collapsed all of a sudden, right? So the people, when they went through this migration from a socialist country into a capitalist economy in the early 90s, they all of a sudden they got access to McDonald's and all of the other American franchises and products and TV shows, right? And whatnot. Exactly, yeah, the brave new world of the West, right? And but back then, that stuff was cool. We used to say, "Oh, this is so cool. This is America." But whereas nowadays, no one would use that phrase. I mean, it would be totally ironic, even if you would.
Trust me, I know we're doing the same thing. It's America. Like my grandmother escaped the Holocaust. My mom was first generation here in America. So when you talk about the American dream, I understand it. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, because I come from extreme dysfunction. I come from generations of people surviving, and I'm literally an embodiment of what complex trauma looks like when it becomes unhealed over generations, and how your life gets destroyed over it. But when you talked about your country going through all those different changes, that affects our bodies at a cellular level and at a genetic level. So when you think about dyslexia, right, and having learning impairments and having to deal with that, that's something that a lot of people deal with, and a lot of it goes under the radar. People can't talk about it. It becomes a stigma. It becomes shameful.
Exactly, and that's where ignorance kicks in, right? Because earlier you mentioned ignorance. It's something that stops the development. It stops the idea of pursuing a better future for everyone. If you're complacent, at all of a sudden you stop moving forward. You stop developing. And you stop helping people this way as well. If we're ignorant about people's disabilities, and I don't mean at any point that I have any issues with that. Like it's an issue. Everybody has issues, but I'm a very privileged man. It's easy for me to overcome these issues, right? Whereas for someone else that has actual limitations in their life and actual issues, people with too much of a ignorant worldview are going to make it much harder for them to develop themselves and be their best version of themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and sometimes ignorance isn't their fault, right? Like no one ever teaches you how to human. So that's the whole purpose of what I'm doing, right? Is to help people understand there's other ways through. You don't have to be stuck in these same cycles. And when you think about like dyslexia and, the European Union, I can't speak for the broader European Union, but I know for a fact, like the UK is far more advanced in trauma, education, understanding at a holistic level. And I can't speak for the rest of the European, or like they're not part of the European Union anymore, but in general, they're more advanced, right? So in the US, they've never been able to tie dyslexia or any type of learning disability to unprocessed trauma until recently. So sometimes it's not even about being ignorant. It's about literally like not being taught properly. And there's a difference between intentional ignorance, right, and complacency. But I do think though that what's interesting about that, and for me also, I've never been diagnosed with dyslexia. I really generally don't have problems, but there have been moments where I have inverted numbers, and it's affected me professionally because I worked for financial aid in college, and I remember bringing like someone's social into the the man in the room that I like worked for, and it was inverted. And these are the things, that's a freeze response in your brain. So when you think about redefining the human experience through the lens of trauma, those are freeze responses. And the brain then inverts those things. But what you did, I think your journey is interesting because you were able to overcome, right, that dyslexia and those coding issues and bring this together. And that's kind of what I've done too. Like I've been able to overcome all my hardship and turn it into and alchemize it into something really beautiful so that other people can find connection in themselves to exactly that. Because I want there to be no barriers to entry for people finding healing. The problem isn't even like America's an ignorant country. Let's just be honest about that. But this situation isn't ignorance. This is because we've never been taught as a society, because
exactly
this is widely discussed.
It's awareness, right? It's spreading awareness.
Yeah, but it's not only that. Like people are like professionals aren't taught. Like they thought I had a tumor at one point on my adrenal gland, and when I didn't, they told me that I should just needed to get to a better BMI. And I was like, I'm already working out at that point 5 to 7 hours a week of doing high intensity boot camps at Barry's boot camp and other places. I'm starving myself. And the endocrinologist, and I was like, listen, if I have what you say I have, they tried to misdiagnose me with PCOS. And I'm like, I don't have that. I was like, I have none of those indicators. The only reason you even know this is because I asked for a blood test because my hair was falling out. So like a hormone panel. So there's a lot of misunderstanding at a macro level, and people are getting misdiagnosed and they don't have the ability to find change in their life because they don't understand it. So when you think about nervous system regulation, right? We were discussing this before about bilateral stimulation and nervous system regulation. That actually helps retrain your brain and gets it into a place where your nervous system is regulated, and you might not have as many of those dysregulated symptoms, because the dyslexia part that you're talking about when you were in high school or as a younger kid, that was also when you think about what was going on in your country, in your family, whatever was going on, I'm sure that was compounded. Like when I was having those inversions of numbers, my life was on fire. And I was 21, and my dad, I remember my mom would say that he also had like trouble. Sometimes he would invert letters. Again, that's a freeze. My ex-father-in-law, same thing. And these are all symptoms and somatic responses to unprocessed trauma in your bodies. But you can also reverse that. That's what's so cool about this, is you could reverse illness. And that's why I got excited, because in my last, I did a live right before this by myself. And in my last live, I talked about how holistic measurement is similar. That's how I look at healing at a holistic level, right? You can't look at things in silo. You can't just look at one channel, like your homepage, right? Versus your marketing collateral. You have to look at things holistically to make sure that translation and exactly what the meaning of those words say are doing the right thing. And that's how I look at it in terms of ad tech as well. So when you think about translation and you think about dyslexia and all of those things, how do you think your journey has been shaped, through the lens of trauma?
I mean, it starts, when you're a young kid and you're not aware of what's going on, you just see that you're different, that you have issues. You can't even put a name on it first. When I was a kid, people were not diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia or whatever. This was just not talked about at all. Whereas nowadays, it's completely different. Like there's so much more awareness. You just open TikTok and eventually people self-diagnose themselves with a bunch of things, right? Which might also be another part of that
it's a problem.
issue. The other perspective, everyone has ADHD these days, right?
But no, that's a somatic response to an overstimulation. But that's
exactly.
That's my exact point, so I want to pause there, though. That's my
all of the scrolling is dooming your brain. Like
it's not just that, though. It's every single piece of stimuli, every single thing that you're trying to do. Everyone's trying to compete with each other to have the best clothes, the best vacations. They want to have an Instagram perfect life. And the problem when you keep doing that, and your professional career tells you to do more and more and more, and you keep adding it on. Like I was literally having flashbacks and wetting the bed while I was interviewing at Amazon, Google, Oracle. My brain didn't work, and I still secured a job at Oracle. And I got there and I did internal and external mentorship. I joined the Women's Leadership Committee on the board. I did all of these different things. I didn't know how to stop. So when you think about overstimulation, and it's not just, it's like we say it jokingly that everyone has ADD, but the reality is that our society does. And
it's forcing you into that. I mean, so as you said, everyone's competing for your attention. Attention is the currency of the modern world, right?
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons why my kids, they don't get access to short form media. They don't have their smartphones. I mean, even if they do, it's on a very limited time and basis of what they actually can do with them. because I know what kind of damage that can make to a human brain, especially at a lower age when there's such high neuroplasticity, when the brain shapes into all of the forms that it's going to keep for the rest of their life. And if you expose them to such, stimuli as you mentioned, this will there's a bunch of studies on this, and this isn't even a secret anymore. Even like countries like Australia, for example, they totally banned TikTok
Yeah.
for ages under 14, which doesn't help much because there's still, you can still doom scroll on Instagram or YouTube or whatever is your poison,
I
so,
mean,
and we're all guilty of it. I do it too, right? I pull out my phone just to check what's on my calendar, and oh, look, half an hour is gone, right?
yeah. That's why I
Already
don't
doom
have any
scrolling to a
excuses
bunch of
for
other
people who
things.
don't respond. If you can't respond to a text, there's no excuse because you're on your phone all the time. So, but so to your point, so both my parents were therapists, and they were old hippies. So I've been living this lifestyle of no TV, like having only healthy whole foods, everything
Yep,
natural. My parents, that was my background. I was only allowed I don't know if you had PBS in your country, but I was only allowed to watch PBS, which was, broadcast television and
yep,
Sesame Street and all of that. And so, yeah,
yep,
that's one part from a parenting standpoint of not letting your children, be in front of the screens, right? But then when you think about it, like that's only one portion. Like if you
exactly.
don't if you like decrease screen time, and I'm not saying you, but like as a parent, right? When you think about decreasing screen time, that's great. But when you think about ADD and being overly stimulated, just rushing around places, dragging people from one event to another, not having
Just
any time.
going into a supermarket is overstimulation for some people. I mean, look at all the flashing lights and the loud music and all the stuff that's going on. For people like me who get very sensitive very quick for all this stimulation. For me, it's a nightmare to go into a major supermarket or a shopping mall where there's a lot of different stuff going on. Like I remember when because I used to grow up at a small countryside village with my loving family. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a very privileged guy, right? Even if I have some issues like dyslexia, stuff like that, that's nothing compared to how most of the planet has to live, right? I'm a white male from a loving family in a middle class background with no issues whatsoever. So it's really easy for me to talk from a privileged standpoint. But I remember when I lived in China for a while, when I was studying in China, that was like a real shock to me because I'm used to a very quiet environment. I like taking walks in the forest, in the woods. I like hiking in the mountains. I do climbing and cycling and all of these outdoor sports. Then I went to China, where I was in a very small town of 6 million people, and all of this. There's no nature there. There's no mountains to climb. There's just people everywhere and noise everywhere. And this overstimulation, it was really, really affecting me. It took me a while to get adjusted to this and get used to it. But like people do, they get used to everything eventually, and I did used to got used to that, and it helped me form the way I am today, and especially learning languages like Chinese. Because it's I sometimes say, learning Chinese is for your brain. It's like taking it like this and putting it inside out. It's because it's crazy. You have to build all of these new neural pathways and all of these new neural connections. And it really, really helped me shape the person I am today because it was such a stressful thing for someone with dyslexia to learn all of these Chinese characters, which are very unique, as you might imagine. But it was one of the most liberating moments for me because I had to sit through that, and I'm a very persistent kind of guy. So I just plowed through that and eventually, got my master's degree with all 10 out of 10 degrees, right? So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, it's I'm when you earlier mentioned when you come from a family with a good background when it comes to how you eat and what you do and how you spend your
My
time and
parents had
all of
really
that,
good values and they had a good vision, but
and that's
society
and
wasn't
that's
there yet.
important.
So the
But
problem
that's the difference between why are you a successful person now versus someone who maybe had similar issues or whatever issues they were facing,
no, that's
but they
actually
wouldn't
not.
be in such a
No,
stimulating environment, right? if
it's
if
not
you were
though.
in an environment that wouldn't understand you, you'd probably be a different person, don't you think?
No, well, the thing is that what I'm trying to explain though through what I'm actually saying is that I didn't have that good background. I didn't come from a good family. My family had good values,
Oh,
but I was actually had a really tough life. My whole life has been hard. And when you
Okay.
think about neuroplasticity, I've literally had to retrain my brain across every single part of my life. I've stopped drinking. I've actually healed. I've been healing my own sex and love addiction. I'm going to be doing an after dark about the sobriety spectrum. So when you think about overstimulation, when you're overstimulated, like I was having sensory issues. I actually still have problems. Like I was able to drive this summer on a highway, but I've never had an accident. I literally was having sensory issues. So everything you're talking about, I've been next level and I haven't been understood. And nobody understood me, right? My parents had good values, they had good ideas, but I don't come from a supportive family. I don't have any family. So I have a very opposite. That's actually what
That's
the show
hard to
is.
hear. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. But this show is actually not to highlight people who have had these easy lives, right? It's actually to help people to showcase stories of survival and overcoming things. And I appreciate the dyslexia part, like 100%. Like those characters are hard to understand. But when you think about neuroplasticity, beyond that, neuroplasticity is the ability to build new neural pathways and be able to break addictions and build new habits. And when you talk about being overstimulated at a supermarket, that's something you could actually resolve. And you can actually work through that. You know, I used to not be able to leave my house. I couldn't even I didn't even know I had anxiety until I literally couldn't leave. So when you think about like at a global level, people actually changing their brains and their new neural pathways to break addictions, it's so big. And it's such an important thing for people to understand that you can.
It's an incredibly important topic with all of the addictions we have, because it's not just alcohol and drugs, like most people think. It's addiction to TikTok, if nothing else. There's food cravings, there's this and there's that. Everyone has their own poison, but as you mentioned, neuroplasticity is the key to that. But there's a lot of science behind that. Helping people figure out how to retrain their brain.
That's what I'm doing, though. Is literally what this mission is a heart-centered mission focused on the neuroscience and the understanding of life at a holistic level, so you can do those things. Because neuroplasticity works in so many different ways. You can change. One of the things I talk about a lot, and I would request everyone to follow me, please, across Instagram, across YouTube. And if you're here, please follow, subscribe, like, comment. Really helps the mission. But neuroplasticity can happen in so many different ways. Neuroplasticity can happen when you listen to music and you change the words. I don't know if you're familiar. There's an Offspring song, Self-Esteem. And
that one.
Yeah. And so in the song, it's like, because I have no self-esteem. And that's how I lived my life. And the thing is like, I learned through music. My dad self-regulated through music. We co-regulated through music. He taught me about his own mental health issues through music. And I was only allowed to watch Sesame Street. So I learned through music. So in my head, I hear because I also have a photographic memory from under the age of 2. And most people with this quote unquote level of trauma lose their memory, but I have the opposite. And I've done a lot of research. I've talked to Dr. Bessel, who's actually the founder of the body, the author of The Body Keeps the Score, Gabor Mate. I've seen him speak. I've spoken with him. And I asked them about it because my brain is really different. My doctor, who solved 40 years of disparate somatic responses to trauma, actually, she's like, how do you know my mom's birthday? And I was like, not only do I know your mom's birthday, who I've never met, but I remember exactly the conversation, the context, where we were. I think in images. And I didn't know that most people don't think in images. My brain.
No, we don't.
I know, but so that's the problem. So my brain works differently than a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's why I feel so compelled to share this story, because I think differently. I see things differently. And when you think about neuroplasticity, and those addictions, those are all the things that are true, but it's also addictions to work. It's addictions to abandoning yourself. And abandoning yourself can work in so many different ways, in ways that appear to be healthy. I was doing 14 hours a week of CrossFit, and I was almost 300 pounds multiple times while I was starving myself, while I was working out. So it doesn't matter how much you do, it matters how much you integrate and how much you actually, one of my slogans is do less, because people need to have a break and forget about
just calm down. So the interesting thing is, recently my second daughter, I have 3 kids. I have an older daughter, I have a younger son, and I have a second daughter. And she had a very difficult childbirth when she was born. And there was quite a few complications with that, and it seemingly resulted in her having some issues with focus, concentration, and mostly emotional regulation. So stuff that is typical of ADHD and this kind of neurodivergent issues. And we were to a bunch of different pediatricians and doctors of this and that and all sorts. and they tried all sorts of things, but recently we started going to this, again, we're privileged to be able to afford such childcare and be able to invest into our child for that. But we started working on integrating reflexes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's an extremely interesting topic and very well researched recently, where apparently, when we're born, we have some of these reflexes, like the
I know
neural
exactly what
reflex
you're
or stuff like
talking
that.
about. It's
Right.
very so
So
I work with neurodivergent communities. I work with an autism community, so
yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about when a child learns to walk, whether they're walking on their toes. I totally get that.
still
So
there. Yeah.
that's definitely an interesting part. But I can tell you, the only thing people have to do is regulate your nervous system. All of the other things will dissipate.
And it comes through that, exactly. So once we started stimulating and pacifying the right parts of the nervous system, things started coming together. She started integrating all these reflexes that should have been integrated years ago, and all of a sudden she's sleeping better. She's bumping into objects less frequently. She has
She didn't have any
much.
ability to be in her body. She had no spatial
Exactly.
awareness.
Exactly. It's like
I broke my
you
arm
have your brain and then the body is completely disconnected, or it's just
So
living
I
its
broke
own
my
life.
arm 6 times as a child, 7 times as a child. I
Yeah, because you're
literally,
incredibly clumsy because you just cannot self-regulate your own
well, I
body.
wasn't in my body. I didn't even know I had a
Yeah.
body. I felt disconnected from so one of the core things here that I want to share is like you feel disconnected from your body. I never even knew I had a body. I knew I was at war with it, but I didn't know I had a body.
Yeah.
I was having
Yeah.
somatic responses from under the age of 2. I was throwing up, and I was told that I was an embarrassment to the family from eating too much and throwing up. But I also, at the
Yeah.
same time, I was told that I was a genius. So when you live with that type of
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
paradoxical, environment, this is how this is
That's what we have. Like all of the IQ tests for her are about 4 or 5 years or even more um, ahead. So she's extremely intelligent. Like she's very good at maths
doesn't
and
have to be
languages and
about intelligence.
all
It's
sorts of
about
things.
nervous system regulation. And the thing is, I don't need an IQ.
Well,
I didn't need an IQ
yeah.
test to say that I was a genius.
Well, some other parts of her like are completely behind. Like she's emotional regulation, for example, is on par with a 4 year younger kid.
But no
So
one ever taught her how to emotionally regulate. So how is she supposed to emotionally regulate
exactly,
if no one ever taught
exactly.
her?
So now we're working on exactly this sort of issues. When just taking the time to be together, to not put the pressure on the schedule at all times. Just take some time, just chillax, just sit on the couch without any TV, without any stimuli. Just be here, just be present in this moment. And this is something that's really missing in our society these days. Because if you think about it, we're always going somewhere, we're always doing something, where there's always some music screaming at us somewhere, or some TV or something in the background. And especially there's 5 of us in our household. It's a loud household. You can't avoid that. So for someone like her who's already emotionally very stimulated, it's really really hard for to find a safe spot and be calm. But recently we started, yeah, all of these meditations and things like that, and she's progressed so much. You'd be amazed if you've seen her 3 months ago, and now she's like so much more calm and composed and
I know.
able to express herself, and
Really?
she's
How
just
old is she?
such a brilliant version of
How old is
herself
she?
now. She's 8, so
Right?
we
I mean, that's
yeah,
great that you were able to do that. Like I personally, like I had to get my body out of
it's
lifelong survival mode. Like I was in 40 years of survival
yeah,
mode to the point where I
exactly. And that's so many people
I had a
that
39-year stomach ache and I didn't even know it. When you think about
yeah,
being disconnected from your body, that's what I'm
yeah,
talking about. And I flew under the radar. They didn't have I wasn't ever on a child study team. I don't know what they call it in other countries, but here in the US, when you get diagnosed with some type of educational learning disability or whatever that is, you get put on a child study team, and you have a specific type of learning curriculum and all these resources. My mom worked on a child study team, and I never was diagnosed with anything. It didn't affect my schoolwork, but I can't write. And like I can write, but I can't read my handwriting. Even right now, I scribble things. I'm like,
welcome to the club.
but that's a function of complex trauma. So when you think about emotional dysregulation, right? When you want to go from a regulated state to a dysregulated state to a regulated state, right? And you want to retrain your nervous system. No one ever taught us. My sister had tantrums, like really, really, really bad tantrums at like a very young age, and it was very disruptive. And my dad, who was a little bit further along than most people, he always knew, like he did Tai Chi. It was so embarrassing because he would do it like in the front lawn in the sun, and he'd be sitting outside with rocks on his face and chest. And I'm like, guys, I'm literally getting made fun of at school. We moved to a new school. I got rocks thrown at me. And at that same time, I was also breaking up fights between my parents. So I was like, the last thing I need you to do is sit outside and be a weirdo. But had I known that he was trying to regulate his nervous system, which he didn't even have words for that at the time, but in retrospect,
no one knew about it that time. He was just trying to find a calm spot for himself, right?
Well, it was also really scary as a child. My dad did eventually kill himself. So like he was trying to regulate. That's what I'm saying. I have a real crazy story. So when you're talking about all of these things, I get it. And I love that you're seeing all these different professionals, because the neurodivergent community is trying to retrain people, those types of births, but it's not just from birth. It's literally from years and years and years of genetic compounding over time. And being able
to, you look at how many people go through. Why is there such a high correlation between neurodivergency and drug addiction and alcohol addiction? Because people are simply trying to self-medicate somehow, and because they don't even know what's wrong with them. Just the body is in a constant stress, and they're just trying to calm down somehow. And I'm guilty of that as well. Everyone in our society is abusing alcohol or drugs or something to some extent to regulate themselves, which is actually
not
wrong.
To regulate. Actually, it's to self-abandon. That's what it actually. It's to avoid.
But you're trying to get that dopamine hit or whatever, just to
but it's not regulation. I want to just like clarify that it's not. It's actually self-abandonment.
It's completely the opposite. It's instead of helping you, it's ruining you in the long run, right? What is actually helping you? And I was shocked to hear that from this neurologist that we visited with my daughter. She said one of the best things you can do for your body is just to go outside, just be in the forest, be where there's a lot of green leaves, because the brain functions completely differently when you're exposed to green light. And I don't mean you need to buy some green light stuff or whatever. You don't need anything. You're just, you have to always think about how evolution built us. We're not built to be in black and white rooms with straight walls and edges and corners and a bunch of lights flashing at us. We're built to be in the savannah and to walk in the forest, to walk 20, 30 miles a day. That's what the human body is built for. By sitting down all day and just staring at screens and being exposed to a ton of information, that is not what our body was built for. We were built to walk and hunt and move around in the nature. And this is what I started doing. Like, for example, the other day, I was working from my home office, and I realized it was 11 a.m. I haven't got anything done. I wasted my entire morning just staring at the screen and trying to figure out a problem. What it is, I just went out without any headphones, without any other stimulation, just a bottle of water and a local hill nearby where I go to, where I love that place because it used to be a temple 3,000 years ago. It was populated, and you can still see the ruins of where people used to live. And I just go there, just walk through those ruins and go back home. It takes me an hour and a half, no more than that. I'm a changed man. I come back, I figure out all of my problems. There's no more stress, no more anxiety. And again, I'm very privileged that I can afford something like that. I can live in the countryside and still work at something that I'm very interested in.
The thing is, you don't have to live in the countryside to find nature. Like I live on the Hudson River in New York City, facing Manhattan, and I feel very privileged. I also connect a lot with nature. But the thing is that that's not a panacea, because the reason it works for you is because you've also rebuilt those neural pathways. So what I'm trying to expose here is all the different ways of healing, because it's not one thing, it's everything. If you're
that works for me,
no, but I'm saying, like, in general, that's not the only thing you've done. You've worked on neuroplasticity, you've worked on all these different things. So that's one of your things. I also find a lot of solace in nature as well. Like I've literally healed my life through that, but it's because I think differently now. I'm not mad at I'm not saying mean things to myself. I'm not full of rage. And if I do, I have the ability to regulate my nervous system. So I think it's really beautiful that you've shared your story and that you're sharing your platform. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we can't wait to hear what comes up next. Tell everyone where we find you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can see my name on the screen. My name is Matija. I'm on the YouTube, I guess, TikToks, LinkedIn mostly. But mostly you can find me at taia.io. So that's TAIA.io,
Perfect.
which is what I'm working on.
And we'll add all of that info into the notes in the future. But thank you so much for joining us. I love that you're really focused on trying to help solve those problems. And I think what's really also interesting and just something to think about is like, it's not just your one daughter, right? The other children see this too. They're exposed to it. Yeah. And now that they also can see that that child could change and they could influence their lives, because when you have a sibling or a parent, like I had both, that had extreme issues, it becomes something that no one cares about.
It's a family effort. We work on it together, all of us, without even putting a finger on it. It's just, oh, yeah, we got to do this now. It's a fun activity. You know, the whole family is engaging with a 3-year-old, and we're all having fun, and it benefits everyone. So yeah, but yes, stay safe, everyone, and be optimistic and positive.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
I hope you join us all next week on the next episode of the Trauma Translator.